As you progress through of these lectures of this course, it will become increasingly evident that many of the design concepts behind the Android system were conceived with the goal of promoting reuse of and interaction between the different elements that make up an application. So one such area that we'll explore in this lectures, actually this will entire section, involves the use of fragments. So this lecture will provide an overview of the basics of fragments in terms of what they are and they can be created and how they can be created and used within applications. So the next lectures will work through the tutorial design to show fragments in action when developing applications in Android. So including the implementation of communication between fragments. So what is fragments? Fragment actually. So a fragment here. Let me write here. Fragment here. So a fragment is a self-contained modular section of application user interface and corresponding behavior that can be embedded within an activity. Fragments can be assembled to create an activity during the application design phase and added to or removed from an activity during application runtime to create a dynamically changing user interface. So fragments may only be used as part of an activity and cannot be instantiated as standalone application elements. That being said, however, a fragment can be thought as functional subactivity with its own life cycle similar to that of a full activity. So fragments are stored in the form of XML layout here, and here we can declare fragments. So fragments are stored in the form of XML layouts files and may be added to an activity either by placing appropriate fragment here, as you can see here. Then we can place these fragment elements in the activities layout file or directly through the code within an activities class implementation. So creating a fragment. So the two components that make up a fragment are XML layout file and corresponding Kotlin class. The XML layout file for a fragment takes the same format as a layout for any other activity layout and can contain any combination and complexity of layout managers and views. So we can declare an XML layout as well here, and for example the corresponding class here, let's the key properties within a fragment element here is Android name here. So let's change our main activity to fragment here for fragment. It's just fine. It will not combine, of course. I just want to show you. So, oops. No, actually, this has to same activity here. So let's declare any fragment, or we will declare any fragment here. So I want in this lecture you will or you will show watch and learn what is fragment is, and why we are using this. So the key properties within the fragment element are Android name here. Here, Android name, and here you will have to add your class name, for example, like that, com example. We will do it later lectures. Example, my what's Kotlin fundamentals here, and my fragment here. Because we don't have this class, this will be throw an error here. So So this name, which must reference a class contained within the fragment, and tools the layout, which must reference the XML resource file containing the layout of the fragment. So once added to the layout of activity, fragments may be viewed and manipulated within Android Studio Layout Editor tool. So adding and managing fragments in code. So two ease of adding fragments to an activity via the activities XML layout file comes at the cost of the activity not being able to remove the fragment at runtime. In order to achieve full dynamic control of a fragments during runtime, those activities must be added via code. So this has the advantage that the fragment can be added, removed, and even made to replace one another dynamically while application is running. When using code to manage fragments, the fragment itself will still consist of an XML layout file and a corresponding class. So the difference comes when working with the fragment within the hosting activity. There is a standard sequence of steps when adding a fragment to an activity using code. The first is create an instance of the fragment class, which we will do later lectures, pass an additional intent arguments through the class instantiate, and obtain a reference to the fragment manager instance. And then call begin transaction method on the fragment manager instance. This returns a fragment transaction instance, and then call the add method of the fragment. We will do all of these methods later lectures. The fragment transaction instance, and passing through these arguments the resource ID of the view that is to contain the fragment and fragment class instance, and then lastly commit method of the fragment transaction here. So fragments provide a powerful mechanism for creating reusable models of user interface layout and application behavior, which once created can be embedded in activities. So a fragment consists of a user interface layout file and a class. So fragments may be utilized in an activity either by adding the fragment to the activities layout file or by writing code to manage the fragments at runtime. Fragments added to an activity in code can be removed and replaced dynamically at runtime. All communication between fragments should be performed via the activity within fragments are embedded. So we haven't covered the basics of fragment in this lecture. The next lecture will work through the tutorial designed to reinforce the techniques outlined in this lecture. So I am waiting you in next lecture.